Nature's superiority over nurture in child development, presented by me, Max Lemieux. To understand this argument, we must understand what nature and nurture are, respectively. Firstly, for nature, it is the genetics, biology, and physical appearance that make up who we are, whereas nurture are variables that affect our brain, including abuse, education, and peer pressure. Ken Cherry, with 15 years of experience as an educator, exemplifies what nurture means, stating, "Nurture encompasses the environmental variables that impact who we are. This includes our early childhood experiences, the way we are raised, our social relationships, and the surrounding culture." This quote shows what nurture truly is. Next, how does this connect to the stimulus? Well, both of these quotes will come from the article Soledad, Selena, Latinos, and the Performance of Memory, with the first being, this book explores how a range of Latino/Latino communities, like the observant museum visitors, critically inhabited and interrogated the memorial terrain of Soledad in efforts to measure and create new patterns for their own lives at the close of the 20th century. This quote shows how the museum visitors use events from the past to forge new paths in their future, allowing for them to use environmental variables and show their importance. Secondly, the same article states, "It is not uncommon for a singular figure, event, or image to emerge as a flashpoint for the constellation and transformation of cultural or national memory. Think, for instance, of Stonewall, Jet Magazine's photographs of Emmett Till, Elvis, or the planes creating into the Twin Towers." All of these examples are all very big cultural events in America's history, and all of these are what influenced our beliefs in America today. For instance, from the pictures of Emmett Till, that shows our outlook on racism, or from the planes creating the Twin Towers, which shows our outlook on terrorism. All these environmental variables impact how we react to events. I'm now going to talk about the environmental and genetic impact on childhood. Firstly, with environmental, it affects brain development, shapes their adult future, with key variables including parental abuse and also peer pressure. And this picture in the top left corner is an example of how parental abuse can actually affect a child, as it shows a child and their parent separated by a broken heart, and this shows how that broken heart symbolizes the lack of love from the parent to the child, and how that environmental variable can disrupt them mentally. Next, the genetic impact on childhood. This includes main changes like physical appearance, hair color and height, for instance, and also disabilities like Down syndrome and autism, which both affect brain development. However, since this is an argument, we must ask ourselves which impacts children more. Is it environments, which can affect brain maturity, growth, and even influence genomes? Or is it genetics, which can affect appearance, create disabilities, and also impact bodily changes? Well, the answer is environments. Environments make a multitude of key changes to us as we develop, and these changes eclipse that of genes. In fact, Lakshmi Sivanti, with multiple articles in psychology, states behavioral epigenetic research has indicated that life experiences can affect gene expression. This quote shows how environmental variables can actually impact how genes express themselves and how they even change our well-being, showcasing the true importance of environmental variables. Now I'm going to cover all three superior changes that environmental variables have. These include parental abuse, cultural influence, and also that of eclipsing genetic conditions. Firstly, parental abuse. Our first key brain development environmental variable, and according to Conblog, which is an experienced psychological blog with a multitude of articles, they state, children who experience neglect or stress may struggle emotionally as they grow. This quote shows how abuse can actually affect how children think about relationships and respond to events, as it changes what goes on in their mind. It can even lead to mental disease, which Harris, who is a law, business, and education editor, exemplifies, stating, "The presence of difficult social environments and the absence of positive social environments predicted greater increases in depressive symptoms in youth." This quote shows how bad social environments and the lack of good social environments, for example, parental abuse, can actually impact children as they grow and lead to cases like depression, anxiety, and other mental diseases. Next, cultural influence. This variable, which I touched on earlier in the stimulus connections, are where we grow up and what our beliefs are. This can alter reactions to events. For instance, as I previously talked about the stimulus connections, from the planes creating the Twin Towers to Elvis to the pictures of Emmett Till. And this can also lead to creating certain beliefs like racism or sexism. Now let me provide you an example. When you heard it can also lead to beliefs like racism or sexism, you may have thought, well, that's a negative, right? But that's our cultural influence. That's how we were grown up to believe. Or say you grew up in a racist or sexist environment, you might think that's good. And that all depends on cultural influence, and that shows how important this variable actually is. Lastly, the environmental superiority over genetic variables. According to Learn Genetics Utah, which is an organization focused on learning genetics in Utah, they state, because identical twins develop from a single fertilized egg, they have the same genome. So any differences between twins are due to environments, not genetics. Many different environmental factors can actually disrupt that of what genomes are expressed, and that truly shows their superiority over them and how much they are detrimental to the development of children. Lastly, the relevance of this argument. Well, this argument is very important because abuse is often overlooked in America, and many children around the world actually they suffer from abuse, and this abuse can actually lead to mental diseases like anxiety and depression, as I previously stated. However, these children often blame these mental diseases like anxiety, depression, and other such factors on their genes. I was born this way, many will say. However, abuse and other environmental variables actually lead to that. And so if we don't focus more on the genetic side and actually focus more on the environmental side, we can lead to help save many of these kids who are experiencing abuse all across the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Max, can you tell me if your research went in a different way than you originally thought it was going to go, and why?
So when I first started with this topic, investigating more into this research topic, I realized that many of the claims of why I thought it was going to be more psychological, but it's way more biological. Even though environmental variables are around us, they can actually impact us biologically, as I've stated with genomes. And I thought that was very surprising to me, because how can a big event actually impact us so down to our genetics that were preset at birth? And I found that very interesting. It really changed my outlook.
Okay. And then can you tell me what the impact of your research is for the greater community?
So, as I previously stated, many children experience abuse, and this leads to mental diseases like anxiety and depression. And if we are to look more into environmental variables and realize that they cause these mental diseases, I think this can actually hopefully impact the community, because it can actually lead to less cases of abuse, as long as we realize where that abuse is happening and what it's actually causing.